I stumbled upon 5 unbelievable scary stories that went horribly wrong. I never should have opened that door. But there it was, standing ajar, just inviting me in. The moment I stepped over the threshold, a chill crawled up my spine. An icy breath of air washed over me, and I felt the weight of darkness pressing in around me. My heart raced. I was home alone, wrapped up in my usual routine of binge-watching horror movies. Sweet little distractions, right? But this was different. The shadows danced along the walls, flickering with malicious intent. I could almost hear whispers echoing in the corners, taunting me. It felt wrong. Suddenly, I heard Ida's soft thud from the basement. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was just me and that sound, those deep-throated murmurs slithering through the air. It didn't feel real. I told myself just a pipe, just the wind. But deep down, I felt something sinister lurking, waiting to reveal itself at the worst possible moment. A shadow shifted at the edge of my vision. I blinked hard and it vanished. Was I losing my mind? My thoughts tangled, each one more gruesome than the last. The air turned heavy, pressing against my chest, as if urging me to turn back. Then, a low creaking sound came from above. Something was moving. I knew I shouldn't go, but curiosity, that wretched beast, urged me closer. I moved through the house. Each step echoed like a drum in an empty room, each pause filled with trepidation. I finally reached the basement door. My hand trembled as I touched the cold metal doorknob. What if I wasn't alone? What if? No, I shouldn't think that way. But just then, a crash rang out from inside. My heart dropped. I stumbled backward, as a figure darted past the open door. Their silhouette, dark and undefined, flickered before me. Felt like time stopped. What was happening? I was paralyzed, stuck between the urge to escape and the need to know. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The quiet returned, heavy with anticipation. I took a shaky breath, ready to flee, and then the door slammed shut. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The sudden slam brought me back to reality, a surge of adrenaline flooding my veins. I stumbled against the wall, my heart hammering in my chest as I stared at the door. In the silence that followed, I could hear my pulse thrumming against my eardrums, a frantic rhythm screaming for me to escape. But I was rooted in place, caught in the morbid curiosity that gnawed at the back of my mind. What had just darted past me? Who or what had been lurking in the darkness? My body moved of its own accord, inching closer to the door, pressing my ear against the cold, jagged wood. I strained to listen, but the only sound was the distant patter of raindrops against the window, a rhythmic reminder of nature outside while I felt trapped like prey and caged. The air thickened as I braced myself for any noise, any sudden movement. I closed my eyes, willing the instinctive dread pooling in my stomach to vanish. I nearly laughed at how paranoid I felt, but the eerie chill in the room squashed any amusement. Something was definitely wrong. There it was, Againa's soft thump from within the basement, a low and muffled sound like something being dragged across the floor. I recoiled, stumbling backward, nearly falling over an armchair that had crept closer in the dark. An illusion, surely. I was losing my grip, the shadows playing tricks on my mind. Just when I thought I could will myself to leave, there was a screeching sound, nails on chalkboard that sent my heart into a wild sprint. I gasped and leaped away from the door, now convinced this was not the product of an overactive imagination. This was real, visceral horror. I could taste it in the air. The basement door rattled violently against its frame, as if something inside was desperate to break free. I sprinted to the nearest window, yanking it open and gasping for the damp, stormy air outside, my senses flooding with panic. But I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass. A shadow loomed just behind me. I whipped around to find myself staring into blackness. The basement was an abyss, waiting to swallow me whole. For the first time since I had stepped through that door, I truly felt tangible fear, a raw and visceral sensation crawling beneath my skin. My breath quickened, yet I couldn't look away from the swirling darkness below. Suddenly, as if responding to my dread, the room went ice cold. I fumbled with the window, desperate to escape what lay within the depths of my own home. But the metal frame wouldn't give. A low, guttural growl emanated from the basement now, weaving through the air like a physical force. My thoughts spiraled. Was it a mistake to come inside? Had I awakened something ancient? Something angry? And then I heard it again, clearer this to me, a whisper, soft yet chilling. Stay. I staggered back, my heart pounding so violently I feared it might burst. Before I could process the command, a hand shot out from the basement, pale and skeletal, fingers grasping at the air with a desperate urgency. I screamed, and the sound echoed off the walls, swallowed by the darkness. The faint light from the hallway flickered and died, plunging me into inky black. I bolted back toward the door, my heart in my throat, desperate to escape the terror encroaching upon me. Then, the skeletal hand became a figure, the rest of its form materializing in the dark. It exhaled a breath that felt almost tangible, wrapping around me like chains, binding me in place. Just before it lunged, I saw the twisted, anguished face of what was once human, its eyes hollow and filled with despair. Before I could scream again, the shadows surged forward, engulfing me whole. And just like that, the world tilted, and I fell into darkness, feeling the chill swallow me alive. Coldness penetrated my bones like icy fingers wrapping around my limbs. I was suspended in a void, my mind splintering between fear and disbelief. Sounds echoed, low whispers that twisted in and out of comprehension, each syllable dragging my sanity further into the abyss. Stay, 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 I thrashed, desperately attempting to rid myself of the suffocating darkness binding me. But the more I fought, the tighter the grip became. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching, their gaze heavy and predatory. The horror clawed at my every thought, gnawing away rationality and replacing it with an impending dread that consumed me. Then, the whispers grew louder, morphing into voices of those long gone. I could hear their names, soft and desperate, woven into a tapestry of pulse-quickening terror. Help save us, followed by another competing voice, snarling in agony. Leave. You don't belong here. I could barely breathe, strands of panic weaving themselves tightly around my throat. My heart thudded furiously, an echo of life in a realm that felt far from living. Finally, the weight around me loosened, and the darkness receded just enough to offer a sliver of light. I gasped, my senses igniting as clarity rushed back. But the daylight was foreign. Twisted in hues of gray and swirling shadows, I was back in the kitchen. Yet everything felt utterly altered. The furniture had shifted, as if the house breathed and twisted alongside the spectral aura that clung to it. The walls throbbed with a pulse of their own, and I noticed that the faint aroma of decay hung heavily in the air. Before I could regain my bearings, a figure appeared at the edge of the dimly lit room. It was the silhouette of a woman, ethereal and radiant. Yet the light that radiated from her was not comforting, it was tainted. Her face, once soft, was now marred by the lines of anguish, eyes hollowed out, a gaping maw opened wide, as if she had lost everything. Help me, she rasped, her voice a jarring fracture against the silence. Before I could respond, shadows darted toward me, snatching at my ankles, dragging me backward, their presence gnashing with feral hunger. I could feel them tightening around my legs, relentless, pulling me down toward the very floorboards themselves. No, no, I screamed, kicking and clawing at the air. What had once felt like a home had escalated into an inferno of madness. The woman's lips moved with desperation, her form flickering like a flame threatening to extinguish, but her voice changed, became something monstrous. You'll join us. Forever, the shadows clawed against my skin, sharp and biting. I could barely muster the strength to escape their grasp. With all my might, I broke free, stumbling toward a doorway that suddenly loomed behind Meth's entrance to the basement which I had tried so hard to avoid. Instinct screamed at me to run, yet fear and curiosity intertwined like braided ropes. With a trembling heart, I felt myself pulled toward it, about to succumb to the screams embedded within the house, their siren call drowning my rationality. I stumbled into the basement, gasping as the air changed thicker, charged with chaotic energy. Inside, the shadows became tangible and swirling, braiding together into forms of lost souls. Their faces flickered between torment and longing, forever searching for escape, pleading. My throat constricted as screams erupted from the depths of my being, sounds of terror I didn't know I could muster. Suddenly, the voice of the woman returned, clearer now. "You can't leave." My pulse quickened. And then a spark illuminated the darkness, gleaming. A blade of rusted steel gleaming sinisterly on the floor, calling to me. A scream pierced my thoughts, echoing through the basement, mingling with my own terror. The shadows recoiled, and an unseen force loomed, embodying the very essence of despair. My breath was ragged as panic danced in the air before me. I staggered back, grasping at the wall for support. And in that moment, the blade shattered the fragile boundary between reality and nightmare, dripping with what seemed to be blood. And it called to me. Just as I reached for it, the floor trembled, a low rumble vibrating through the beams overhead. Then, out of the dark abyss, a figure exploded into view, its face distorted, shifting like the shadows. "Welcome home," it hissed before lunging forward. The darkness surged once more, and I realized this was not merely a battle for my life, but for my very soul. As the world around me blurred into chaos, I was falling once again, this time deeper into the horrors that awaited, as if I had unwittingly opened a door that could never be closed. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, the darkness swirling around me so thick I could hardly see. I hit the cold, damp floor of the basement hard, the rusted blade mere inches from my grasp. The figure loomed above me, its grotesque visage flickering in and out of recognition, embodying every nightmare I had ever feared. "Give in," it whispered, a voice like jagged glass, cutting through my resolve. "You belong here as much as they do." My body screamed for movement, yet my mind was caught in a web of raw terror. I tried to crawl backward, my fingers grasping at the ground, trying to escape the shifting shadows that danced toward me like hungry animals. I had to focus. My heart pounded like a war drum, deafening, blurring the world around. Meth cries and whispers melded into a cacophony that threatened to swallow me whole. "Do you feel them?" the figure taunted, pointing with long, bony fingers that seemed to stretch into the void. "The ones who lost their way, the ones who embraced the darkness." As if in response, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Faces emerged in the swirling shadows, mouths wide in silent screams, eyes vacant yet pleading. I recognized a few friends I had lost, relatives whose names became untraceable whispers of their own. Their forms flickered and morphed, shifting between moments of despair and haunting tranquility, as if they had crossed through different planes of existence. "No," I gasped, shaking my head furiously. "This isn't real." "You're not real." The figure lunged, the air thick with a sense of dread, but I rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding its grasp. A new surge of adrenaline scoured through me, driving me toward the rusted blade that glinted with malice. I grasped it in my hand, feeling the weight of it, the promise of violence intertwining with the promise of survival. "Fight, then!" the figure shrieked, frustration fraying its voice as it morphed once again, body turning into grotesque shapes, unfurling from the darkness like a nightmare made flesh. The tension coiled in the air, thick enough to choke on, as I stood at the edge of a precipice, a choice between succumbing to madness or wielding the blade against the encircling horror. The shadows thickened, entwining around my legs like serpents, dragging me slowly back toward the heart of the basement where the lost souls writhed, their despair becoming palpable. "Join us!" they cried, a chorus of sorrow that seated itself deep within my mind, echoing endlessly against the cold walls, breath hitching. I swung the blade through the shadows, its steel flaring against the darkness. Each swing carved out a space, revealing glimpses of light, shimmering portals that flickered into view, tiny windows to salvation or perhaps deeper horrors. The connection with each face sent shivers down my spine, their suffering mingling with my own, distorting the very air around us. "Stop," I shouted, desperation lacing my voice. "You can have peace. You can leave this place." Suddenly, the flickering faces surged forward, merging into a writhing mass fueled by anguish and rage. The momentum crashed against me, hot like burning coals, and I fell backward, the blade slipping from my grasp. It clattered onto the floor, the echo resonating in the darkness with ominous finality. The tortured souls swept over me, their essence cold and suffocating. I struggled but found myself pinned against the concrete, losing fragments of myself as a fierce chill clawed into my very being. They pressed closer, their longing seeping into my thoughts, willing me to abandon any hope of escape. Forever they moaned, a haunting symphony that echoed in the shadows. It burrowed into my mind, resonating with every heartbeat, every breath of despair stolen from the living. Just then, out of the corner of my eye, the ethereal woman re-emerged, her fragile form trembling, desperation coursing through her pale face. "Do not listen," she cried, it a haunting lament. "You must fight. Remember." As she reached for me, her fingers brushed against my skin, igniting a flicker of warmth that pushed back against the cold. In this moment of awakening, the weight of the shadows felt just a bit lighter. But before I could fully grasp it, a deeper growl emanated from the darkness, a sinister promise reverberating through the foundation of the house. "She has lied, she is one of us," the figure hissed, its shape swelling, growing monstrous. In that split second, the shadows recoiled, but my chance slipped like grains of sand through my fingers. The room trembled and the walls breathed, shuddering with an ancient rage ready to consume. "Fight or be lost," the mass roared, an amalgamation of grief and wrath that sent a jolt through me. With a final push, I surged upright, scrambling for the blade, but all around me, the abyss opened wider, revealing endless depths of madness. Darkness clawed at my unsteady heart, and I was teetering on the brink, a misstep away from oblivion, trapped in a nightmare without a way to wake. As I reached for the blade, just as the shadows lunged forward to envelop me, an ethereal voice tore through the chaos. "You're the key, you're the one." And with a chilling realization, I understood this was not just about escaping. It was about awakening something within, something buried beneath fear and despair. But before I could act, the mass bore down on me, and in that heart-stopping moment of dread and anticipation, the world snapped away, leaving only darkness that tasted venomous and suffocating. Then silence, a profound stillness that felt heavy with inevitability. I was left dangling, caught between nightmare and awakening, as the basement shifted around me, revealing what waited in the shadows. "Reclaim what is yours," it whispered, the phrase curling around my mind, a final, tantalizing promise unsettled in the air. Before I could gather my thoughts, a scream echoed from afar, sharp and visceral, a sound that tasted like broken vows and lost hope. The dread coiled tighter, and with one final, heavy breath, I realized I had merely begun to scratch the suffocating surface of the terror beneath. Dread draped over me like a cloak as I stood in the silent void. The lingering echo of the scream resonated, ripping through the suffocating quiet, hinting at horrors I couldn't yet see. My heart thudded in my chest, a frantic reminder of my mortality, as I surveyed the pitch-black surroundings that seemed to pulse with an eerie life. Shadows writhed in the corners of my vision, glistening with a malevolent hunger that I couldn't comprehend. "Reclaim what is yours," the whisper coiled around my psyche, filling me with both dread and a strange sense of urgency. I knew I had to act. Somewhere in this sprawling nightmare lay the dark truth about myself, buried within the anguished echoes of those who had come before. But where? As if in answer, the darkness shifted, revealing a minuscule, flickering light deep within the depths. It danced tauntingly, beckoning me closer. Heart racing, I hesitated. A primal instinct screamed at me to run, yet I stepped forward into the oppressive gloom. Each stride felt heavier, as if invisible hands clawed at my ankles, trying to drag me back to the darkness. The light fluttered, fading, revealing forms within. They flickered like fireflies' faces morphed from anguish into despair. Flickering in rapid success, Iona twisted gallery in a macabre exhibition. I could see their mouths moving, forming words that were lost in the silence. But their gazes bore into mine, desperate and pleading, weaving a tapestry of shared sorrow and raw terror. "Help us!" A voice rasped, a high-pitched echo dripping with despair. My eyes widened as one of the faces sharpened into focus, a girl I once knew. Her expression twisted by torment, mouth stretched in an eternal cry. "Choose," she gasped, contorting against the shadows that bound her like chains. "Don't let them have you too. Break the cycle." The words resonated deep within me, igniting memories that clawed their way back, moments of laughter shattered by grinning shadows. I had long ignored their warnings, and now I understood I could no longer deny my past. Each face flickered with agony, yet my heart wavered. Was I truly one of them? Suddenly, the darkness stirred with renewed fury, and a cold breath enveloped me, chilling my spine as the figure of my tormentor surged forward, its unnatural eyes fixated on me with ravenous hunger. "Join us, my dear," it purred, its voice now smooth as silk, each syllable wrapped around my mind like an intoxicating drug. "You feel their pain, don't you? They belong to the darkness." "You do? No," I shouted, desperation breaking through the suffocating grip the shadows held around me. "I will not become what you are." "Then you require sacrifice," it hissed, the sneer twisting its grotesque features as it coiled closer. "The balance must be maintained. For every hope, there must be a despair." With a guttural cry, the presence lunged, and I stumbled backward just as the basement shook violently, the walls vibrating with a rage that mirrored my own heart. A sickening pull yanked at my gut as shadows reached out, clawing at my sanity, trying to pull me into their grasp. I screamed against the suffocating weight of darkness, and with my last ounce of defiance, I turned toward the flickering light. The girl's face warped before me, morphing between the girl I loved and the grieving specter she had become. "Find me," she cried, thrashing against her bindings. "The key is not just within. It's in the choices you make." My vision blurred, both horrified and desperate, as the shadow figure lunged toward me. I managed to dodge, but something shattered in the chaos binding that tethered us to this accursed place. The basement trembled, the anguished cries of lost souls echoing, mingling with a cacophony of sorrow, and in that moment, the light surged brighter, spilling forth a radiant halo that illuminated everything like fire. I staggered towards it, driven by an instinct I had long ignored, yearning to break free from the chains of fear. But as I reached for the spectral embrace, a familiar echo pierced the air, a sound that promised salvation, yet felt like impending doom. The basement walls trembled violently underfoot, and the shadows shrieked, rising in a monstrous frenzy. "You cannot escape. You will join them." Just as the radiant light consumed me, I felt an icy grip wrap around my wrist, a pull that anchored me within the tempest. Shouts morphed to wails, and the basement quaked as if it were alive, ready to devour everything. "The choice is yours," a whisper clawed against my mind, and I turned, catching a final glance of the girl's anguished face, the flicker of hope slowly fading, replaced by the encroaching doom of the dark mass that threatened to overpower even the brightest light. Then it struck, an overwhelming wave of despair crashed around me, and I felt myself being torn apart as the floor collapsed beneath my feet. The light sputtered and died. Darkness consumed me, each pulsing heartbeat echoing my impending doom. That I fell into the void, and with nothing left to hold on to, the last thought that spiraled through my mind was whether I would continue to be trapped within their pain or if I could rise above it all. And just as I plunged into the abyss, a piercing scream shattered the stillness, a scream unrecognizable yet hauntingly familiar. "Choose wisely." It echoed one final time, as everything fell into darkness once more. My fall felt suspended in eternal darkness, as though every heartbeat elongated into an endless pulse of dread. What should have been the ground remained elusive, an ungraspable grip of black, swirling tens enveloping me like thick fog, wrapping around my limbs, pulling me deeper into malice. The disembodied cries of tormented souls offered little comfort, blending into a moaning orchestra of eternal despair. Then, suddenly, the void fractured, and I was abruptly thrust into a new realistic oppressive room that reeked of mildew and decay, its dim light flickering sporadically from a single swinging bulb. The air felt dense and charged, thick with something unnameable. I lay sprawled on a cold, cracked floor, my body aching and every nerve ignited. Forcing myself upright, I scanned the barren chamber. The walls pulsed with shadows, morphing into grotesque shapes that whispered long-forgotten secrets, their spectral hands stretching toward me, beckoning and taunting in equal measure. I stumbled to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribcage, a prisoner still, just in a different cell. At that moment, I noticed them, the faces. Other souls, huddled in corners. Their hollow eyes whispered stories of anguish as they stared blankly ahead. Some were barely recognizable, distorted by despair, yet others mimicked the lost expressions of loved ones I once knew, twisted in pain and fear. Memories clawed at my mind, fragments of laughter merged with the echoes of a past, riddled with suffering and loss. It felt as if my heart was being clawed out through my throat. "Help us," they all murmured, the wind stealing the words before I could catch their meaning. I forced myself to move deeper into the room, where dim figures swayed absent-mindedly, trapped in their own purgatory. I reached a window, a jagged piece of glass encased in rusted metal, revealing a desolate and crumbling world outside. Shadows moved in the periphery beyond the glass, dark shapes lurking just beyond reach. They danced in unison, circling a pit that burned with a dark, obsidian fire, sending wisps of smoke spiraling into the air, mingling with the stench of death. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, a chill racing down my spine as a haunting realization swept over me. The anguished cries were not coming from strangers but from loved ones lost to the grip of this darkness. I could distinguish their voices among the cacophony. Each word chipped away at my sanity, their pleas felt personal, like stabbing reminders of my failures. My breath quickened as the echoes of unforgettable memories resurfaced. My sister's laughter, my mother's embrace, a friend's reassuring presence. "Find the key," a sepulchral whisper emerged from the shadows, rattling through the walls, vibrating through my chest with suffocating urgency. Panic rose within me as tendrils of despair coiled tighter around my heart. The room began to tremble, reverberating like a pulse among shadows, growing more violent with each heartbeat. "The key lies in the darkness," a voice hissed, slithering into my mind, sharpening the focus on further horrors that lay ahead, a warning tinged with cruel anticipation. Glancing back at the imprisoned souls, I realized their faces were growing gaunter with each passing moment. Something inside me snapped, a visceral need for escape, to unravel the thread binding this cycle. "Where is it?" I cried out, my voice trembling among the shadows, drowning against the relentless cries of the damned. "Seek and you may find," the voice echoed again, deeper than before, resonating as the shadows lurched towards me as if they could sense my resolve. I turned on my heel, determined to uncover whatever darkness lay behind me. The weight of lost souls pressed down harder against my chest. With each step, the room twisted, elongating into a maze of despair. The air grew heavier, wrapping around me in strangling coils, each inhalation laced with the noxious scent of regret and sorrow. My heart raced as I stumbled forward, following the whispers that twisted and turned like deceitful silhouettes. Lurking at the edge of the light, suddenly, I saw Ida glimmering shard amidst the darkness, a small glint that beckoned with a fierce urgency. It sat upon a pedestal made of gnarled roots, pulsating like a heartbeat amid the chaos. My fingers reached out, trembling with equal parts hope and terror, as the whispers around me crescendoed into a cacophonous roar, drowning my thoughts. "Do not take what is not yours. You cannot control it." I hesitated, the shadows crawling closer, their twisted forms morphing into nightmarish reflections of my life-lost friends, shattered dreams, broken promises. They howled as they closed in, the grotesque faces merging into a singular, terrifying image of my own self, twisted in anguish. Trust them, and all shall be revealed. The voice reverberated around me as the metal creaked ominously above that I stood frozen, clutching the shard that pulsed gently in my palm, a connection to the very essence of this malevolent force. Just then, the flickering bulb above exploded, showering the room in darkness, and the shadows lunged for me, forcing me back. In that moment, the shard twisted violently in my grip, and I felt its power surge through me. The room shattered into a kaleidoscope of nightmares. As chaos reigned, the last remnants of the realm began to fall apart, shadows engulfing shadows, and the whispers crescendoed into a singular scream of fury and despair. But within this cacophony, a dreadful realization gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. This was the darkness I'd been drawn to confront all along, a part of me not yet fully understood. And just as I felt myself begin to succumb to the ravenous darkness, a chilling voice announced loudly, ringing through the void as everything started to spiral, "Welcome back. Now let's never speak of the past again." Before I could react, I was swallowed whole by the endless void, and in the terrifying abyss, darkness took on a new form, one that wasn't just behind me, but within me, waging war against my very soul. The scream echoed once more, colossal and fragmented, filled with a desperate plea that resonated uncomfortably close. I gasped, searching for a breath that was no longer mine, trapped in an endless cycle of horror as shadows twisted into something far more familiar. "Choose wisely" echoed around me once more as the world dissolved, leaving me suspended in a crucible of despair with a choice awaiting its reckoning. The darkness twisted and contorted, and as I floated in this abyss, reality felt like sand slipping through my fingers. A deep, resonating laughter echoed, a cacophony of mocking tones layered with cruel intent. My heart pounded wildly in my chest, echoing in the hollow space surrounding me. The remnants of a world long lost fluttered past, images flitting just out of reach, a childhood home, birthdays long forgotten, the faces of those I had lost. Each vision shattered like glass against the weight of despair, returning to me like a tide. With each fleeting memory, the laughter morphed into agonized wails, a symphony of torment ripping through the emptiness. And then, like a spark igniting fuel, the memories struck like lightning, sudden revelations locked within my heart. My sister's voice rang clear amidst the turmoil, begging for release, drowned in shadows, locked away forever. "Find me," she whispered, echoing through the void, ethereal and pleading. "You must find me. Where are you?" I screamed into the deep, my voice swallowed by swirling nightmares. "What have they done to you?" "Not what they could do, but what you have done," the abyss countered, a voice thick with venom. "This fear, this anguish, it is yours." And suddenly, I was cast back into the room, the oppressive chamber from before, but it had changed. The air shimmered with an unnatural light, saturating the walls with shifting patterns of horror. Images flashed, the faces of the lost, drowning in despair, morphed into their tormentors, laughing ghoulishly, flickering in and out of existence. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat, recognizing the figures. They were reflections of me, past versions, each representing mistakes splattered across time, the sins I refused to confront. "Embrace your failures," they hissed in unison. "They are your greatest gifts." That I shook my head, clenching my hands into fists. "You are nothing but shadows of fear." I howled defiantly, though it felt like a desperate plea for courage. But my resolve faltered as the chamber trembled, darkened forms coiling closer, unfurling from the corners like hungry vipers. They hissed my name with slick tongues, tempting me to succumb. The very fabric of the room pulsated with energy, feeding off my despair, growing stronger as it surrounded me. "Choose wisely, for the key to freedom lies not in finding it but in facing what is chained inside." The voice resounded, reverberating against the walls, as though the very shadows were awaiting my decision. As I turned, searching for a way out, I stumbled upon the pedestal again, still throbbing with ominous energy. The shard glinted, a beacon of twisted hope amid the writhing despair. Yet could it truly lead to freedom? Or were the echoes of pain futilely entreating me nearer to madness? As I grabbed hold of it once more, a torrent of images flooded, promises I made, the love I once embodied, and the promises unkept that shackled my spirit. Each pulse resonated deeper inside me, a chaos held in crystalline form, and I found myself tumbling through a haze of recollections where the shadows awaited like predators. Face them or lose yourself forever, the shadows chanted, circling as they peeled back the layers of my essence, exposing raw, gaping wounds buried deep within my heart. Suddenly, everything turned black and white, the world sharpening into clarity just as I caught a glimpse of a figure standing behind me, familiar and ghostly. A child that reflected pain I hardly recognized. My sister. "Help me," she cried, reaching forward from a trembling void. "You left me behind." "Never," I yelled back, insisting as tears streamed down my cheeks. But with each proclamation, the shadows grew restless, vibrating with rage at my defiance. They closed in, whispering threats that echoed through the air. The room began to distort into a swirling vortex, warping the ground beneath my feet as the shadows surged upward, trying to breach the gap. "Embrace your demons," they beckoned. As they loomed, the air thickened with a potent dread. I stumbled towards my sister, desperation fueling every step. Her eyes gleamed with a haunting innocence, and as their shadows were cast upon her, her face twisted into horror, pleading for help as the darkness threatened to consume her entirely. With every ounce of strength, I gripped the shard tightly, the choice crystallizing. Would I dare let the darkness in to save her from her own fate, or would I fight against it to save myself from drowning alongside her? Suddenly, time slowed, and as a crescendo of whispers flooded my thoughts, the shadows lunged toward me. "Make a choice," they shrieked, a million voices woven into a tapestry of nightmare. And as the twisted world collapsed around us, I hesitated, heart racing. In that split second, a crack emerged beneath my feet, the ground fissuring as I reached out towards the girl I once knew, feeling myself teetering between the darkness and her light. As her screams echoed in my ears, the shadows pulled away, revealing a doorway behind them, a shimmering portal that beckoned with both promise and deceit. Take the leap or perish alongside your past. And with the last vestige of hope spiraling into shadow, the grip of the shard tightened in my palm, the weight of choice heavy as the abyss beckoned to swallow me whole. "No!" I screamed, as sudden silence enveloped the chaos, leaving me in the eerie calm, straddling the precipice of decision, caught between light and dark when everything shattered again. The echoing void whispered my name, the reflection of lost memories looming, each step leading toward imminent darkness. Cracks tore through my world once more, and just before it collapsed entirely, I heard my sister's last desperate cry, "You must choose." With everything hanging in the balance, my heart raced, the shadows closing in with insatiable hunger. I could no longer tell where she ended, and I began when the final tremors of reality faded away. The silence fractured, splintering into a cacophony of whispers that clawed at my sanity. The darkness pressed in with suffocating weight, grinding against my ribs, eager to shatter the fragile shield of will I held against it. Images spun and flipped like a morbid flipbook, flickering before my eyes. My sister trapped in the inky void, her innocence tarnished, her cries resonating within the marrow of my bones. "Choose!" The ghoulish chorus reverberated, a harmonized melody of dread, urging me toward unthinkable decisions. The shard pulsed in my grip, an alluring heartbeat that promised power and sacrifice in equal measure. Confusion swirled within me, choking my thoughts with the price for my sister's release cost more than I was willing to pay. I stepped back, retreating into the ghostly tendrils of shadow that slinked around my ankles like living snakes. Every fiber of my being screamed in protest as a haze of despair enshrouded me. The boundaries of self and other began to warp, the shadows whispering unspeakable secrets, drawing me into their depths where reason dissolved as I thrashed against their pull. I glimpsed flickers of my past, the secrets I had buried, the betrayals I dared not confront, all coalescing into a specter of my former choices that danced before me like flames eager to consume. The very fabric of reality sparked, and I was left torn. Should I seize the shard's power or abandon my sister to the darkness she so desperately feared? "Help me!" she cried one last time, the sound breaking through the oppressive blanket of malice. I could see her face again, distorted but shimmering, pleading with hope that perhaps I might still be her savior. The shadows recoiled disdainfully, a guttural hiss escaping their forms, their malevolence palpable. In a moment of clarity, I pressed the shard closer to my heart. Feeling its icy tendrils seep into my thoughts, could I harness its dark energy to defeat the malevolence that sought to engulf us both? But the reflection of my sister twisted and warped as shadows tightened around her, merging with her form like ink bleeding into water. No! I shouted, pain reverberating through my chest. Panic ignited, and with it came visceral determination. I lunged forward, the shard thrumming, building up a storm within me, channeling my grief and regret into a single purpose: rescue her or perish. As my feet hit the trembling ground, the shadows recoiled momentarily, and in that fleeting opportunity, I shouted her name, Sophie. The sound resonated against the encroaching darkness, an act of rebellion carving a path through despair. Just then, an ear-piercing scream ripped through the chaos. Sophie's visage contorted into a grotesque mask as the shadows clawed at her, dragging her deeper. No! Desperation clawed at my throat. I felt the shard pulse with a will of its own, exuding warmth unlike anything I had ever known. Perhaps this wasn't mere darkness. I could seize it. I could confront the very essence of fear. Fueled by raw emotion, I climbed higher above the swirling void as the shadows writhed and pulsed. My sister's outstretched hand was pulling at reality itself, her spirit entangled in the very abyss I sought to conquer. "I'm coming!" I screamed, inching closer to her grasp. With a primal roar, I plunged the shard deep into my chest. Pain erupted. Electric visions cascaded through my mind, every fleeting whisper of loss and joy now crystallized into clarity. The shadows reared back, screeching in opposition, but I could feel the surge of power coiling around me. A cacophony of voices in harmonious defiance. "Face your darkness," I roared, feeling the weight of guilt dissipate like smoke. "I choose to confront you with that declaration." A blinding light erupted from the shard, illuminating the walls of the abyss as the shadows shrank, retreating like frightened flames. I fought against the tide, lunging toward my sister, grasping her hand in a desperate bid to pull her from the clutches of despair. But as her hand slipped into my grasp, something awful happened. She twisted grotesquely, her scream morphing into that of a creature broken by loss, becoming an echo of all the failures I had tucked away. "You left me behind," she spat, the shadows wrapping around her like a suffocating cocoon, merging our forms into one. My scream filled the infinite darkness as I was dragged deeper into the very maelstrom I sought to escape. The last thing I saw was the glimmer of her eyes turning lifeless, reflecting my own darkness, and then the world shattered into a million pieces of despair. To end that haunting moment, reality folded inward as the shadows writhed in glee, whispering promises I could never refuse. As I plummeted through the collapsing void, I felt her slip away, trapped among the echoes of perfidious laughter, leaving me to confront the horror of my own making. Then the world split again, a new door opening amid the chaos, revealing glimmers of familiar faces lurking behind, disembodied and grinning with manic glee, each beckoning me with haunting familiarity. With a surge of eroded hope wavering in the abyss, darkness washed over me, whispering through the chasms of my mind, "Submit or face unending torment." And just before the shadow engulfed me, I gasped, me heart pounding as it all faded, falling into eternal night. I woke gasping, hands clawing at air as the remnants of my nightmare clung to me like cobwebs, fragile yet suffocating. The shadows had receded, but remnants of their icy claws lingered in the corners of my mind. The dark whispering, however, still echoed, threading through my thoughts like a sinister melody. Shadows flickered across my vision, memories dancing tauntingly before me. I was sprawled on a damp stone floor, sharp and uneven beneath my trembling body. The scent of mold and decay was nearly overwhelming. Panic surged again as I realized this wasn't my home. It was a crypt-like setting, dank and dimly lit, where the very walls pulsed as if alive. My breath quickened, each shallow gasp met with the bitter tang of fear. "Sophie," I called out, desperation threading through my tone. My voice ricocheted against ancient stones before fading into silence. No response, not even the echoes of her once vibrant cries. The shadows whispered language I couldn't comprehend, flowing through the endless corridors that spiraled around me. A soft flutter of noise pricked my ears, like the gentle rustle of fabric. I spun, eyes darting towards the sound, heart thundering in my chest. There she was, what once resembled her standing at the far end of an archway, her spectral form glowing dimly. "Help," she mouthed, her lips forming the words silently, but her eyes empty pools of despair. My heart tightened. This wasn't the Sophie I knew. There was something deeply wrong. "I'm coming," I yelled, pushing off the ground to run toward her, my legs weak yet driven by an instinct I could barely comprehend. As I approached, the corridor grew darker, tendrils of shadow stretching along the walls reached toward me like gnarled fingers. They coiled around my ankles, pulling me back with a vengeance. I shook them off, but they doubled their efforts, hurling whispers of guilt and sorrow my way, slashing at me with every painful slice of memory. Each whisper echoed failures, promises broken, times I had failed to protect her. "Oh," I screamed, shaking my head, forcing my thoughts to remain focused. I had to save her. I pushed on, my determination a shield against the creeping despair. But as I reached her, the flickering apparition morphed into a malevolent shape, twisted fingers and contorted limbs, a monstrous distortion of what had been my sister. "Why did you leave me?" she hissed, the smile on her dead lips widening, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "No, Sophie, stop," I cried, stepping back, but it was too late. The shadows encased her completely, melding with her form like an ancient tapestry reweaving itself. My heart twisted within me, feeling her pain, her betrayal mirroring in my soul. "I needed you, but you were never there." The shadows exploded at her command, whipping up like furious winds, swallowing the light and distorting reality once more. The ethereal dark realm erupted, the walls vibrating under an unseen force, and I staggered back, crashing into something cold and solid. The ground quaked, and the air thrummed with a cadence that warped my senses. I was losing grip on my reality, lurching forward as nightmarish shapes began to peel back the veil of Shadows, a cacophony of figures entwined in eternal torment. Lost souls groping toward me as if I were their last hope. "Join us," they cried in unison, bodies contorting, faces twisted in masochistic delight. I shielded my eyes from their desperate gazes, only to feel a sharp gust sweep across my back wings. I turned to face a monumental creature looming behind me, woven from darkness and the torment of 1,000 souls. Hear the cries of those forgotten. It boomed, voice an amalgamation of moans and whispers. "Join them. Embrace the shadows." "What do you want from me?" I yelled, heart racing, feeling all hope collapse around me. The shadows tightened their grasp, willing me to submit to the horror that awaited in their depths. "Sacrifice," it intoned, and the spectral Sophie flickered back into focus, hanging limply before me as though suspended between life and death. To save one, another must fall into the void. The choice hung before me like a guillotine blade poised to sever my resolve, both options threading through my mind like poison. I could feel Sophie's voice whispering tenuously, "Help me," but I was drowning. Dread settled heavy in my chest, choking my intentions as anguish tore through me, pushing me toward a decision I couldn't comprehend. A pulse surged at the base of my spine. The shard. I still had it, the power thrumming along with the rhythm of my heartbeat, crying for release. What if I refuse? I choked out, fighting against the magnetic pull of surrender that clawed at my commitment to save either of us. The creature's laughter reverberated, cold and mirthless, sending tremors through the encircling shadows. Refusal only brings despair. Choose or confront the end. A sudden darkness rippled through my thoughts, a chokehold around my breathing as shadows began to engulf Sophia, a horrifying image of fading hope. What if there was another way? A chance not only for her release but for my survival as well. With desperation fueling my thoughts, I grasped the shard tightly, feeling its dark energy pulse to life. I had to fight through the consuming darkness. "I will not be your prisoner." But as the words reverberated through the air, something Chang'e shift in the balance of the ethereal dread wrapping around us. The pleading rasp of other lost souls broke free, growing deafening. Then let the struggle commence. The creature roared, as the shadows erupted into a swirling maelstrom, enveloping both Sophie and me as I prepared to unleash the true potential of the shard. My mind raced with fear and fury as they scrambled against something unseen. The pull of darkness greater than anything I had ever known, the light I hoped to wield flickered, and I was left on the cusp of a decision, teetering on the brink of insanity. Then, through the storm of consuming shadow, I saw the faces again, hundreds of them clawed at reality, staring back with unholy glee, each a piece of a shattered puzzle, an unfathomable horror waiting to unveil itself as I would have to push ever further into the depths to unravel my fate. I screamed against the tide, feeling the boundaries of my mind warping, tearing, unraveling ill-choose. I screamed into the void. But just as I drew breath to declare my ultimate choice, the ground dropped out from beneath me, plunging me into the depths of a chilling blackness. It felt endless, a gaping maw devouring my resolve, and a harrowing laugh echoed around me as I fell, twisting into a spiraling abyss where every choice morphed into a struggle against my own unraveling sanity. And before I could comprehend the form of the creature still hovering over me, its shadow stretching toward Sophie, reaching for the one thing I never anticipated abandoning, the darkness exploded. I awoke to the sound of laughter, soft, unnerving, and closer than I liked. I could taste bile at the back of my throat as I blinked against the harsh glare of a fluorescent light. My surroundings came into focus, and as dread seeped in, I realized I was back in my own basement, lying on the floor, eerily familiar yet disconcertingly transformed. The walls pulsed rhythmically, as if the house itself was breathing. Panic surged through me, igniting primal instincts. Frantically glancing around, I sought any sign of Sophie. The shadows slithered at the corners of my vision, whispering terrible things, but the chill of loss wrapped around my heart like a vice. Sophie, I cried out, compelled by a deep yearning that pierced through the haze of terror surrounding me. The silence that followed was alarming, almost mocking. Then a low chuckle echoed from the darkness, resonating like a death knell. I turned, heart racing, hoping to find her, but all I could see were shadows, pressing closer, taunting me. The grip of despair welled in my chest. "Where are you?" I shouted, desperate. The only response was the awful laughter, curling around me like smoke. "She's here, but not the way you remember." A figure emerged from the shadows, pale and flickering, trembling as if caught between this world and the next. My heart leaped as I recognized Hera, distorted reflection of Sophie, but something primal lurked behind her hollow gaze. "Help me," she mouthed, the words escaping in wisps of smoke, twisting into the air like tendrils of despair. "No," I yelled, fighting the pull of her distorted form. "This isn't you." Shadows writhed around her, warping her image, nightmarish visions closing in on me like a suffocating blanket. "You left me," she whispered, her voice laced with betrayal, cutting deeper than any knife. "You didn't save me." In that moment of agonizing clarity, I understood I hadn't escaped. I was still in the underbelly of the darkness I'd faced before, caught in the aftermath of my own reckoning. The shadows were alive, feeding off my guilt, twisted reflections of every decision that had accumulated, the pain of letting go, the remnants of lost love. I screamed again as the laughter grew louder, echoing through the depths. "I will not accept this." I lunged for her, but as I reached, she transformed into a grotesque mix of grief and rage that tore at my heart. "Choose your fate." The shadows coiled around, each whisper growing more insistent, a tempest of demands urging me to sacrifice my very essence. I trembled with the weight of their intent, feeling the abyss tugging at my sanity, the very air thick with the musty smell of regret haunting me. "What do you want from me?" I gasped, realizing my struggle was no longer just for Sophia, it was for my own soul. "Sacrifice one to free the other," the voice echoed, a dark promise curling around my senses. Each flicker of Sophie's form morphed an amalgamation of the lost moments, the choices, the regrets I had buried. "You wanted to save her, but you must face the darkness to reclaim your light," it hissed, the laughter surrounding me like a shroud. I in the crushing shadows, I struggled against the truth that clawed at the edges of my mind. I was the architect of our tragedies, the one who had buried my fears deeper, who had given in to the darkness instead of fighting. I needed to face it. No, I shouted defiantly, forcing myself to confront the pain buried within. I refused to let you win. As I embraced that defiance, the shadows recoiled, the cacophony of voices rising in panic. I focused on the shard of darkness lodged within my very being, the broken pieces of me that yearned for release. I summoned the memories of Sophie, the laughter, the warmth, the love that once brightened my life. Together, I murmured, reaching for her distorted image as the shadows pulsed with renewed fury. Together we will fight. Just then, the shadows convulsed violently, screeching as the bonds that chained me to this nightmare began to unravel. You cannot. I can, I screamed, pulling more energy from within. You will not take her, not today. A blinding light erupted from the shard, illuminating the basement with an ethereal glow. In that moment, all at once, the shadows faltered, revealing their grotesque forms and the faces of the lost souls entwined within them. But among them, I saw Sophie's face, a warm smile emerging from anguish, illuminating my resolve. Fight, she cried, merging with the light as the shadows shrieked in despair. I charged towards their depths, wielding the light that bound our souls, breaking free from the chains that strangled us both. Together, I roared, feeling Sophie's energy coursing through me like an unbreakable bond. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in rage as we fought side by side. As the light enveloped us, the whispers turned to wails, the shadows dissolving into nothingness, revealing the path toward salvation. I am here, I whispered, extending my hand towards Sophie. We're free. But just as I reached her, the malevolent laughter echoed one last time, resonating through the air with chilling finality. Not so fast. The shadows coalesced once more, whispering promises of despair and vengeance that rattled my mind. Suddenly, the ground beneath us cracked open, beckoning us toward an insatiable void. Yet as I reached for her, I felt the tension snap. The choice is yours to make. Save yourself, or be trapped forever. I was teetering on the edge. My heart felt as if it was being pulled in two directions at once. I realized the horrifying truth. It wasn't just about Sophie. I had to face not only the darkness that threatened to consume her, but the part of me that craved that darkness. Choose wisely, the shadows hissed, closing in around us. A final battle between light and dark about to unfold. In that moment, all clarity collapsed. I turned to Sophie, my heart full yet trembling. I could confront the darkness or let it choke the last vestiges of love I carried within. That I love you, I said, tears streaming down my face as I prepared to face the darkness. The shadows howled in betrayal, clawing at my resolve. But I steeled myself. No more running, I whispered, plunging the shard into the abyss, embracing the very core of my fear. But as the echoes of shadows shattered against the light, the last thing I heard was Sophie's sobbing whisper, choose wisely, before a deafening silence engulfed everything, leaving only the weight of the choices made in the dark. Then, nothing.